Some believe the classics are tales lost to time, but tonight we shall awaken them.
In the city of Venice, while most people slept, a secret had already changed everything. Othello, the most respected general in the Republic, had just married Desdemona, the daughter of a powerful senator. Their love had grown quietly, built from long conversations and shared stories, until it became something neither of them could deny. Yet, because their world was full of prejudice and suspicion, they kept their marriage hidden, hoping to avoid scandal. However, secrets rarely stay buried for long. A man named Iago, who served under Othello, had already decided that his commander was his enemy. He believed Othello had passed him over for promotion, choosing the young officer Cassio instead. Whether that was truly the reason or not, Iago's bitterness was real, and it burned quietly inside him. So that night, Iago went straight to Desdemona's father, Brabantio. With careful words and dark hints, he told him that his daughter had run away, not with a noble suitor, but with Othello. Brabantio woke in panic, convinced that his child had been stolen, tricked, or bewitched. In a city like Venice, where Othello was always seen as an outsider, those fears spread quickly. Soon, armed men were searching the streets. Meanwhile, Othello himself was calm. When they finally found him, he did not deny what he had done. Instead, he spoke honestly, saying that Desdemona had chosen him freely. Even so, the accusations were serious enough that they were brought before the Duke and the Venetian council. Desdemona was called in to speak for herself. Standing before the most powerful men in the city, she did not hesitate. She told them that she loved Othello, not because of spells or tricks, but because of his courage, his honesty, and the life he had lived. She chose him with open eyes, and she was willing to stand by that choice. The council believed her. So Othello's marriage was allowed to stand, and the matter was closed. Yet while Othello was being cleared, Iago was already planning something far more dangerous. Venice soon faced a new threat, and Othello was ordered to sail to Cyprus to defend it. Desdemona was allowed to follow him, and the newly married couple prepared to leave the city together. To anyone watching, it looked like a happy ending, but Iago knew that this was only the beginning, because he had just learned something important. Othello trusted him, and trust, when placed in the wrong hands, is the most powerful weapon of all. By the time Othello and Desdemona reached the island of Cyprus, the war they had been sent to fight was already over. A violent storm had destroyed the enemy fleet before a single battle could begin. To the people of Cyprus, it felt like a miracle. To Iago, it felt like opportunity. With no war to distract them, every eye would now be on the people around Othello, and that meant every weakness would be easier to exploit. As the soldiers gathered to celebrate their victory, Iago began quietly setting his plan in motion. He watched Cassio, the young officer who had taken the promotion he wanted, and he saw exactly what he needed. Cassio was polite, skilled, and respected, but he was also inexperienced with alcohol and easily embarrassed when he lost control. So Iago encouraged him to drink. At first, Cassio refused, knowing he had to remain on duty, but Iago gently pressed him, pretending it was only a friendly toast. One drink became two, and before long, Cassio was no longer himself. His words grew louder, his temper shorter, and soon a simple disagreement turned into a public brawl. When Othello arrived and saw the chaos, his disappointment was clear. He had trusted Cassio, and now that trust had been broken. With no hesitation, he stripped Cassio of his rank. Cassio was devastated. As soon as the crowd dispersed, he turned to Iago in shame, believing that his career was over. Iago, wearing the face of a loyal friend, offered him comfort. All he suggested was this: speak to Desdemona. He told Cassio that Desdemona was kind, persuasive, and deeply respected by Othello. If anyone could convince Othello to forgive him, it would be her. Cassio, desperate to regain his honor, agreed. That was exactly what Iago wanted, because now, every time Cassio spoke to Desdemona, Iago would make sure Othello noticed. At first, Othello saw nothing strange. He trusted both his wife and his officer. But Iago did not accuse, he only hinted. He would pause before speaking, he would sigh, he would pretend to hold back a thought. And slowly, Othello began to feel something he had never felt before: doubt. Iago reminded him, gently and carefully, that Desdemona was young, beautiful, and admired by many men. He did not say she was unfaithful, he only suggested that perhaps she could be. Othello tried to ignore it, yet once a suspicion enters the mind, it refuses to leave. So, while Desdemona continued to speak kindly on Cassio's behalf, Othello began to watch her differently. Where once he saw love, he now searched for lies. And all the while, Iago stood beside him, feeding the fire with quiet, patient words. The trap was no longer being built, it was already working. By now, Iago no longer needed to work hard to reach Othello's mind. The seed he had planted was already growing, twisting every thought into something darker. Whenever Desdemona spoke kindly to Cassio, Othello noticed. Whenever Cassio appeared, Othello watched him. What once felt harmless now felt suspicious, and Iago made sure that every small moment carried a shadow. Still, Othello resisted. He did not want to believe that the woman he loved could betray him, so he demanded proof. Iago was ready. He told Othello that he had once seen Cassio holding Desdemona's handkerchief, a small cloth Othello had given his wife as a symbol of their love. It was nothing more than a story, but it was enough. Othello's heart seized when he heard it, because that handkerchief meant everything to him, and now it was gone. Unbeknownst to Desdemona, Iago had already stolen it and placed it in Cassio's room, so when Cassio later found it there, he had no idea that he was holding the evidence that would destroy them all. When Othello soon saw the handkerchief in Cassio's possession, the last of his doubt turned into certainty. In his mind, the lie was now a fact. From that moment on, Othello no longer thought of himself as a husband, he saw himself as a judge. He believed it was his duty to punish betrayal, no matter how much it hurt him. Iago encouraged him quietly, praising his sense of honor while pushing him further toward violence. Before long, Othello swore that Desdemona would die for what she had done, and Iago, standing beside him, swore to help. Yet Desdemona still had no idea what was happening. She continued to speak on Cassio's behalf, believing she was doing something good, never realizing that every word was making Othello's anger grow. Love, in Othello's mind, had already been replaced by certainty, and certainty is far more dangerous than hatred. By this point, Othello was no longer the calm, confident man he once had been. The thoughts Iago had planted had grown so powerful that they now controlled him completely. Every time Desdemona spoke, he heard lies. Every time she smiled, he saw betrayal. Iago continued to push him, not with shouting or anger, but with carefully chosen moments. He made Othello watch Cassio laugh and speak easily, and then he twisted those moments into something cruel. He convinced Othello that Cassio was laughing about Desdemona, mocking him behind his back. Unable to bear it, Othello's mind finally cracked. In front of Iago, he collapsed, shaking with rage and confusion. Iago pretended to be concerned, but inside he knew he had won. When Othello recovered, he was no longer thinking like a husband, he was thinking like an executioner. Soon after, he confronted Desdemona. His words were harsh, his voice cold. She did not understand what she had done to deserve such cruelty, and every attempt she made to defend herself only made him angrier. To Othello, her innocence now looked like deception. He called her unfaithful. He called her dishonest. He stripped her of her dignity in front of others, humiliating her while she stood in shock and heartbreak. Yet still, she loved him. That was the tragedy. While Desdemona tried to hold on to their marriage, Iago was already preparing the final step. He promised Othello that Cassio would soon be dealt with, and that Desdemona would follow. At this point, Othello no longer hesitated. A man who once told stories of courage and honor now believed that murder was justice, and the night that would decide everything was already drawing near. The night was quiet when Othello entered Desdemona's chamber. The world outside was calm, but inside him everything was burning. Desdemona was asleep when he stood beside her bed. For a moment he simply watched her, remembering the woman he loved. Yet the lies in his mind were louder than his memories. When she woke, she saw a stranger where her husband once stood. Othello told her that she must die for betraying him. She was confused and terrified, begging him to explain what she had done. He accused her of loving Cassio, of giving away the handkerchief, of mocking him behind his back. Desdemona denied everything, but Othello no longer listened. Even when she asked to pray, he refused, believing that justice could not wait. And so, in the quiet of their bedroom, he ended her life. Moments later, the truth finally began to break through the darkness. Emilia, Iago's own wife, revealed what had really happened. She explained how the handkerchief had been stolen and how Iago had used it to frame Desdemona. One by one, the lies fell apart. Iago was exposed. Othello, hearing the truth, realized what he had done. The woman he loved had been innocent. The monster he feared had never existed. There was nothing left to fix. So Othello took his own life beside Desdemona, choosing to die with her rather than live with the knowledge of what he had done. And Iago, the man who had caused it all, was taken away, silent and defeated, leaving behind nothing but ruin. Thus ended the story of Othello, not as a tale of hatred, but as a warning of how easily love can be destroyed by a single patient lie.